All right. Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Working People, a podcast about the lives, jobs, dreams, and struggles of the working class today. Brought to you in partnership with In These Times magazine and the Real News Network, produced by Jules Taylor, and made possible by the support of listeners like you. Working People is a proud member of the Labor Radio Podcast Network. If you're hungry for more worker and labor-focused shows like ours, follow the link in the show notes and go check out the other great shows in our network. And please, please, please support the work that we are doing here at Working People so we can keep growing and keep bringing y'all more important conversations every week. You can do that by leaving us a positive review on Apple Podcasts. And of course, you can share these episodes on your social media and share them with your coworkers, your friends, and family members. And, the single best thing you can do to support our work is become a paid monthly subscriber on Patreon for just $5 a month. Subscribe for $10 a month, and you'll also get a print subscription to the amazing In These Times magazine delivered right to your door every month. And if you haven't subscribed yet, but you want to get access to all of our great bonus episodes, just head on over to patreon.com/workingpeople. That's patreon.com/workingpeople. Hit the subscribe button and you'll immediately unlock a whole lot of awesome bonus content that we've published over the past 5 seasons of the show. And yes, since folks have been asking, we are continuing with our yearly tradition of putting out an all Alvarez siblings special Halloween episode for spooky season. That will be out any day now. In case you guys missed it, last year we got the Alvarez clan back together to talk about our childhood monster movie favorite, Tremors. And we talked about how 2 working class dudes whooped the asses of some giant prehistoric man-eating underground worms. So, go check out our past spooky season specials because they're some of my favorite bonus episodes of all time. And definitely keep your ears peeled for our fun sibling special that's coming out this week. My name is Maximilian Alvarez, and we've got a great episode for y'all today. As you no doubt have heard, the wave of grassroots worker organizing is spreading to different industries and businesses around the country, including those that have notoriously resisted any and all unionization efforts in the past. The Home Depot, the single largest home improvement retail company in the United States, is one of those businesses. And there is a union drive underway as we speak at a store in Northeast Philly. Now, friend of the show and one of the best labor journalists in the game, in my opinion, the great Johan Furman, wrote a really great piece on the union drive for More Perfect Union last month. And we're going to link to this in the show notes, but just to sort of set the table for you guys, I'm going to read some passages from Jonah's piece. So Jonah writes, quote, "On Monday, September 19th, workers filed a petition to organize a union among 267 workers at a Home Depot in Northeast Philadelphia. If successful, the independent union would be the first at the home repair chain, the 5th largest private employer in the U.S. Vince Quiles, who's worked at the store for 5 years, says the union effort gathered over 100 signatures for an election in just 5 weeks. With nearly 500,000 Home Depot workers nationwide, a successful win in Philadelphia could create an opportunity to rapidly grow the ranks of unionized workers in this country. Home Depot has raked in record-breaking profits during the pandemic, fueled by a surge of homeowners seeking to improve their properties. With demand rising, the company raised its prices. Higher prices drove down transactions among lower-income customers, but higher-income customers more than made up for the loss. Quote, in the second quarter of 2022, we delivered the highest quarterly sales and earnings in our company's history, end quote, CEO Ted Decker recently announced. Quiles began asking why the company couldn't pay its workers more. Last year, Home Depot made $16 billion in profit. In a meeting with a regional vice president, Quiles questioned why the company couldn't pay premiums for operating machinery like forklifts, or for translating for Spanish-language customers, or for working in multiple departments. The regional manager touted that the company had spent $1 billion on employee compensation. You spent $1 billion over 500,000 employees, Quiles remembers saying, and $15 billion in stock buybacks, not to mention $7 billion more on investor dividends. Meanwhile, workers at the Home Depot in Philadelphia routinely worry about paying bills, having enough food for both their kids and themselves, or paying rent. The starting wage at the store is around $14.50. The Walmart they share a shopping center with pays more. End quote. Now, thanks to Jonah, I was actually able to connect with Vince, and, we've been trying to find a time to record an episode for the past few weeks, which was frankly a pain in the ass because Vince obviously works long shifts, 5 days a week. He's got a family to take care of, and I have been traveling for work for the past 3 weeks straight. But I am so glad that we were able to make it happen. And we actually recorded this incredible conversation that we're going to share with y'all today while I was in my hotel room in Oakland last week. And man, I genuinely can't say enough great things about Vince. He's such an incredible, kind, genuine, caring person. But, he's also a fighter. He has a burning sense of right and wrong. And, win, lose, or draw, I think he and his coworkers have already made history by taking that incredibly brave step to say to themselves and to Home Depot that they deserve better and that they're going to fight for it. That's really all it takes. Our bosses, our landlords, our politicians, so many people in the order-giving class just bank on us accepting whatever we're given and admitting that we are powerless to do anything to change our circumstances. But when working people like Vince refuse to take that crap, when we stand up for ourselves and our fellow workers, and when others see that and are inspired to do the same, that spark catches and it rips through the status quo like a wildfire. And that is why the bosses have tried so hard for so long to convince us that what workers are doing right now was impossible. Now, eligible voters at the Roosevelt Boulevard store in Philly will be casting their union election ballots starting on November 2nd. And of course, Home Depot is putting up a fight every step of the way. We have included links in the show notes for today's episode reporting that workers are experiencing surveillance, intimidation, and other forms of union busting that violate their basic rights. And, as I keep saying on this show, at The Real News, and on Breaking Points, and anywhere else anyone will listen to me, we all have a role to play here. We all need to help spread the word about this union drive, about any underhanded actions from Home Depot, and we need to all vocally and publicly let companies like Home Depot and Starbucks and Amazon know that we are watching them. And we also need to let workers know that we stand with them and we will be there for them no matter what the outcome. Workers like Vince. This is his story.
My name's Vince Quiles. I work at Home Depot, store 4112 in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. That's on Roosevelt Boulevard. Been working there for almost 6 years now, and I've worked in many various capacities, whether it be overnight, during the day as a supervisor, had a trajectory for management there. So a lot of the critiques that I make and what it is that we're doing stems from that and just a lot of knowledge that I accrued over that time.
Hell yeah. Well, Vince, it is so great to chat with you, brother. And, I imagine, like myself, everyone who listens to this show has been watching what y'all have been doing over there in Philly and has been just pumped up seeing this, incredible organizing effort. Jesus, I mean, there's so much in the world right now that, is doesn't exactly inspire hope, right? I mean, like we've got a lot of problems to work out, but I think that when we see working people like you and your coworkers banding together, standing up, saying we deserve better than this, we can do better than this, and we're going to do it together, like that just is so important. And I think it really does inspire people to really feel like they have, the ability to change things, right? We don't just all have to accept the world that's presented to us, right? We can actually do something to make this place better. And that is exactly what you guys are doing over there in Philly at your Home Depot store. And, since you kind of made the announcement about the organizing effort, I know that, even more stores have expressed interest. We've now got, Lowe's in the mix with workers trying to organize there. The rank and file energy is still growing in places like Starbucks, I think even PetSmart, Chipotle. This I think is really important and really exciting. And yeah, I mean, it's just been incredible to watch from afar. And now I'm honored to get to chat to you one-on-one about all of this stuff. So we're gonna dig into all of that. But, of course, I just want to get to know more about you first. And I was wondering if we could sort of, dig a little into your backstory and sort of walk our way up to how you came to work at Home Depot. So are you a Philly boy, born and bred?
Yeah, not born. I was born in Massachusetts. My dad was in the Coast Guard at the time, so we lived up there. But moved here when I was like 2. My mom's side of the family grew up here. My dad's side of the family grew up in Puerto Rico. Um, yeah, but just growing up in Philly, I actually grew up not too far from where it is that I work now at that Home Depot in that same neighborhood. And I mean, like personally, like right, like the trajectory I had, growing up. So both my parents, came from like very impoverished situations. My mom growing up in North Philly, over on like Allegheny Avenue. Um, and then my dad growing up in Puerto Rico, I think he grew up in Guaynabo. And they both just grew up like very poor, right? So I feel like their experiences kind of set a lot of the stage for just like what inspires and motivates me to try and do like what it is that we're doing now, right? And just the struggles that they talked about, the hardship that they talked about, like kind of seeing them, right? Like I had the opportunity and the privilege to go to private schools. I went to a school in Philly called Roman Catholic High School, which is, got a lot of prestige with it. It's a historic high school. It was the first Catholic boys' school in the country. Actually, coming out of high school, I had the opportunity to go to the Air Force Academy Prep School. Unfortunately, I was not mature enough for that opportunity at the time, but I would say there's a lot of things that I learned there that really helped me to kind of understand the ideas that I have of leadership. Right, we got to be around a lot of like colonels, generals, a lot of people in the Air Force, And not just that, but just like experiences that like we lived. Like I know one thing that kind of pushes me along, like just a memory that I have, was being over there and like during our basic training, like, there would be like these different runs and stuff like that that we would do. And I remember going through, and one of the things that like our team was really big on was when you finished, you would go back and you would find somebody that was in your squad and you would finish with them. So you might end up running it, 1.5 times, 2 times, maybe even depending on how slow the person might have been. Um, and how long the run was, right? But the whole thing was you're only as strong as your weakest link, and just kind of experiencing stuff like that, right? Going back, helping people across the finish line, getting them across the goal, and like realizing like, oh, like, right, this is a team, like this is what it's about. And I feel like, right, in something like that, like it's very obvious, like especially like if you go into the military, right, you're so tethered to each other and your success. I think it's the same thing with like sports teams, right? You have to have that trust with each other, that connection with each other in order to have that success. So it's like a lot of stuff like that, like really helped to kind of cater my mindset. A lot of like the politics that my parents were into as well. Um, my mom's like a super passionate person. And that I think helps me a lot in what it is that we're doing now. And just trying to like maintain that passion, that effort and that care. My dad's like really like, he's a computer programmer. So he's like very like into puzzles, and like he'll break stuff down a lot like that. And so that's kind of how I try and like analyze what it is we're doing now, right? You kind of think of it like a chess match or something like that, where it's just like, oh, like how do you move? If you make this move, what's going to come of that? If you make that move, what's going to come of that? So I think, I'm definitely the culmination of the two of them. And then I think the thing that really like tops me out personally is my sister. So my sister's much braver than I am. Like she's, oh my goodness, like this girl's like so like outgoing and adventurous. Um, and I feel like I kind of had to like channel a little bit of her energy when it came time to like, getting the signatures, filing the petition, because like I've always been a little bit averse to change. And kind of just like again, like reflecting on like her and like just the role that she's played in my life. She's always been like very independent and like outgoing and adventurous. So that's kind of like what I think rounds me out in terms of what was very influential for me to get to this point and to try and help lead an organizing effort at Home Depot. And then but say like in between all that, right, like growing up, volunteering a lot, like in church and stuff, and right, those feelings of satisfaction that you get from helping people. Like I remember um when I think I was maybe like 16. And they used to do this thing called the Family Fall Festival, right over on Wyoming Ave, like over in North Philly, right? It was the pastor that married my parents. He would do like this community event. I remember one year, like working, it was like this like big boxing ring thing, and people like put on these giant gloves, right? They hit each other, and I just remember like my sister and I messing around with the kids, right, having a lot of fun. Like we were kind of like the I guess like the chaperones or whatever, like the people manning that station, and just like people having so much fun, right? And seeing like the smiles on kids' faces and like understanding like the importance of like connection in your society and the world around you. And I think things like that were also super important, right? And super imperative for me to like really lean into to try and again like get to this point. Yeah, but growing up in the city, just like growing up with those people in my life, like a lot of friends that I have. Yeah, so that's kind of like what I guess gave me like some of the tools that I have now. And then I mean, I guess the more important thing, like if you want to just like kind of dive into like what it's like working at Home Depot, right? Why it is that like I mean, how do I put this? Right. So like the trajectory that I was on with like school was very different than where I ended up. Right. And I kind of
Mm-hmm.
had this expectation of myself, like, my dad, like I said, like he works at Comcast, he's a programmer. And that was kind of like that type of life that I had envisioned too. I wasn't quite sure like how, like I said, like at first, like, I thought, oh, like I'll go to law school, I'm a corporate lawyer, all that stuff, right? Make a lot of money and get to do really cool shit. And then I would
Yeah, I,
say,
I want I wanted to be a medical doctor for like the first 18 years of my life, and then that went
yeah,
out the window.
yeah, exactly. And right is it's like, because I guess once you get like a little bit of experience in the world, like your views change. And so like that was kind of, again, that was the trajectory that I was on, right? That's the whole point of going to a place like the Air Force Academy, trying to take advantage of that opportunity. That didn't work out. I end up leaving, coming back home, and start studying at CCP. So I was doing a dual enrollment between Community College of Philadelphia and Temple University. Originally, I was going to do engineering, and then I ended up switching over to economics. And so I'm thinking like, okay, well, maybe I'll go some route like that, right? So, I'm going along, I'm chugging along in school, making a lot of the mistakes a lot of people my age at that time were making, not really knowing like what it is I want to do, right? Like I got real close to finishing the first 2 years for the electrical engineering. And I was just like, this isn't me. Like, I don't want to do this. This is like really, really difficult taking classes like Calc 3 and linear algebra and, physics 2, like dynamics. And it was just like, it was a lot of stuff that I was just like, I'm not really into that. So, that kind of, that's where like I'm at like Home Depot, right? I'm working there. And this, I just looked at it like a part-time gig, right? Actually, a lot of times what I would always say is like, I would use it as a reminder, right? That's why you got to finish school, right? Because if you don't finish school, you don't get that college degree, you can be stuck at a place like this, right? And that's kind of the culture that's built in, right? Especially like that, like college culture. You go to private school, like that's what you got to do. So that was what was always like in my mind. And that was always the way that I thought. So for a long time, I wasn't even engaged in like Home Depot to like the extent that I am now in terms of like caring that much about the issues there. Because again, I kind of saw this as like, hey, if other people like do this, like that's cool. It's nothing to them, but that's not what I'm going to personally do.
Mm-hmm.
And then I had a life event, like many people have life events, and I had a kid. And so, now you got a kid coming in, you got him, my girlfriend I got to take care of. So it's like, all right, like now we got to make moves, I've got a family coming. So, I always knew that the opportunity to be a supervisor there was open to me. A lot of people in management would always approach me about it, like, hey, like, if you ever decide, college isn't the thing for you and you want a company to move up in, like, you can do a lot of stuff here. So there's a lot of that. So I finally just took them up on it. I said, all right, cool. Like, you know what? Like, I'll sit down for an interview. Um, so I go, I interview, I end up getting the job. I mean, I was one of those, like, you kind of know you're going to get it when you go into it.
Mm-hmm.
Just because again, like people have been asking you for so long, there's just certain skills that I have. Like, I've always kind of had like a tendency to like favor like strong leadership, right? Like if you were to ever meet my family, my parents, my sister, right? And in terms of everything that I said about them, they also are all like very strong leaders in their own respects and like in their own walks of life. Like we're a very strongly opinionated family. We sit down, we debate, we talk about a lot of different things, we talk about it very passionately. Um, so,
The Puerto Rican family talking
oh
passionately.
yeah,
You
oh
you
yeah,
must be
yeah.
joking, man.
This out, Papa, you already know. So as the thing, and then it's right, like I also grew up in a household like my parents are very engaged in like politics and stuff. So it's it's very, very like strong thinking like that. And then I feel like it's like that mixed in with like the military, right? Like that kind of just helped to shape the mentality that I had. And when I say too with like military, right, like I also talk about like so both my dad and my uncle, like they were career military, right? My dad retired after 16 years because he had an accident where he broke his back. So he couldn't stay in, and my uncle did the full 20, right? Like my cousins in the army, like my dad's whole side of the family, like they're very big with that, right? So you always hear like a lot of like stories, right? And you hear about like these cool things. Like my dad would tell me stories about his uncle who was in the Vietnam War, right? And like the point of these stories would always kind of be like the importance of showing strong leadership and buying in and understanding that you're a piece to a whole, right? And all of these great things that like I guess you kind of like argue now currently in this labor movement, right? And these were just ideas that I always took into like whenever I had an opportunity to be in a leadership role. So as a supervisor, right, that was how I always tried to conduct myself. And I mean, before getting the supervisor position, like whether it was when we used to work like unloading the box trucks, like I've always just kind of been that person that's had a bit of like a magnetic personality. Like, I try to be like that motivator, right? Like how we were talking about earlier, like how our homie Tavita is like really good at like motivating people and getting them to get up and to do something, right? Like that was always kind of the role that I played, was the guy who was friends with everybody and knew how things were going in your life and how to kind of push you along and knew how to how to motivate you, right?
Hell
So
yeah.
that was what
Shout
really.
out to our brother Tavita
Oh yeah,
Uhatafe.
hell yeah! Shout out to Davita, bro. Much love. But yeah, and so that's kind of what carried me favor into getting to that point, in the supervisor position. And I just remember, like, once I made that decision, like, one thing that I would constantly hear that was really important for this was always like, man, like, you can do like whatever you want in this company, like your ability to speak to people, your ability to connect with people, like how you to handle problems and stuff, right? Like all the nice things you always want to hear. Um, like there was a lot of that. And I mean, I knew, again, like just the way that I thought, like I was built a little bit different. So I was like, you know what, okay, like I'm gonna try this out. Like, I had experienced a lot of things within that building that had already started to like change the way that I like viewed like retail work, right? And being an associate in a store, right? And just my ideas had kind of started to change. And so, I become a supervisor. Um and I just remember like coming in, like, it was a crazy time. So I got promoted like in June of 2020. So like we're like 3 months into the pandemic. Nobody's showing up to work, everybody's scared. Um it just, like, customers are frustrated, right? You're having supply chain issues. You don't have the stuff you need on the shelves. People are getting thrown all around the building. Like, I never forget, like, so becoming the plumbing supervisor, like, before that, like, I never told anybody no at work, right? That was just because I always had the mentality of, like, try and be helpful, like, help people wherever you can. So even if
Hmm.
I didn't know, like, I would try and help people find the answer. And I remember that I went from never saying no to saying no all the damn time. And it's because, like, you're like up to your eyeballs in the amount of work you have to do. You're trying to get stuff done. They're like, oh, go deal with this customer issue over here in this department. You go, you do that. Then you got to go deal with another one. Oh, there's nobody driving in lumber. So you got to go drop a bunch of drywall. Okay, now you got to go over to the service desk. You're good at dealing with people. So this customer's freaking out. I don't feel like dealing with them. Can you go deal with them? Right. Like a bunch of stuff like that. And it's just like, it's crazy when you reflect on like the high levels of stress that you feel. Like, I remember not even just myself, but like other people, like you would just be so, like, there were days where I was so overwhelmed that I'd be like on the verge of tears in my car. Like, once I got out of work, just because I was so stressed out the whole day that, like, when I finally stopped and just had time to like process the day, it was just like, holy shit, like, why is a human being like dealing with this? Right. And then I think it would be like magnified, right? Because then, obviously, like, you consider your own circumstance, your own, situations that you have, but then you start to kind of look across your store and you see, like, oh shit, like, I'm not the only one, going through this stuff. There are a lot of people in this building right now who are just having insane amounts of bullshit just thrown at them. And it's just kind of like the expectation, like, oh, it just is what it is. The pandemic's really bad. All we got to do is just make it through this and we'll be fine on the other end. Um, and it's just, right, like, you kind of like buy into that idea, like we talked about before getting on, like, right, like you buy into like this, like, oh, like, people mean what they say, and if you just work hard, it's a meritocracy. Like, you're going to move up, you're going to be able to do your thing. And like, I would say in some ways, I guess, like, that was kind of true of me, right? Like, I was getting a lot of looks that other people hadn't gotten in the store. Like, I was basically like on a fast track in the building. So I'm in plumbing for 6 months, and then they go and they move me to receiving. And it was actually funny because when they moved me from the plumbing department, I was actually kind of mad, right? So they put me in receiving basically to try and put me in a department where I was going to learn a lot of stuff, and that was going to help like really push me through to the next level. But I was mad because I wanted to stay in plumbing because I felt like the department hadn't really been fixed, and I was like, I want to stay in this department and see this through, like, see it get fixed, see it be a little bit easier for people to deal with. And unfortunately, I was not given that opportunity. But I would say, like, plumbing kind of like really helps to like shape like my view of like the relationship between managers and employees, and like to really see from the management perspective the struggle that employees would go through, right? Because just like being a non-management, right, you always know your problems, but then once you start to go the other route, then you get a little bit more full picture, right? So being a supervisor, I could see more of the manager's perspective and some of the gripes that they had, as opposed to just always seeing it from the associate's perspective. And so that was how, like, I was very like binary in that, like, I never really thought past like the manager level or the supervisor level. I mean, the associate level. Um, So, I go to receiving, right? And that kind of gets me even more of an understanding, right, of how the building like operates, because all the problems in the building end up in the receiving, right? If somebody's got a problem, more than likely we're going to end up dealing with it in the back in some way, shape, or form. And not only that, there just seems to not be that many people in each building that understand the department to that extent. So you kind of become a part of like this exclusive club where then you go and like the skills you learn in that department kind of also help you to be able to like read through different scenarios and kind of get a better understanding of the landscape of the store and some of the problems, right? Like my one coworker, she would always say, we're the Scooby Doo crew. And this is because we solve mysteries all day, right? We find out where missing things are, find out if something has shown up or not. It's just a lot of like investigative work. And so that kind of gave me the skill set that was needed in order to better understand this company. So I would say like I had like a couple things along the way that like really kind of like rubbed me the wrong way in terms of how I viewed working like in that company and just how I viewed like corporate America as a whole and like understanding the mentality that they employ. But like I had like one instance, right? So when I was the plumbing supervisor, there was an associate who they were a really, really hard worker. They were by themselves, they were from another country, and they were here in the US by themselves. They worked really, really, really. I'm talking about like they would go into like the shelves. We call them like bays. Like they would go into the bays and come out all dusty, trying to grab all the items behind the shelves. They would do a lot of like my tasks as a supervisor because they knew that they were throwing me all around the store. So they would say like, "Oh, don't worry, like I got you." It'd be things like right, like we'd have to do what was called like a smart list, where you go through and you scan and you check like high or like important SKUs that the company or important items, sorry, that the company tells you to check out, and basically like you check the inventory for it. So she would just do like a lot of stuff like that. So I remember one day, we were talking, and they started breaking down, crying, talking about how they were having trouble paying for their bills. That they were here in the States by themselves and they didn't really have much help and that they were basically having to pick and choose what bills to pay. So I'm over here. Okay. So my company says, the inverted pyramid, the top line is customers and next is, frontline associates. Okay. Well, this frontline associate who's extremely important, they need help. They need, they need to be compensated more, right, in order to pay for their bills and they more than deserve it, right? I, as their supervisor, can see that this person is very deserving, of a raise. They work very, very hard. So I go and I talk to my immediate manager and I'm like, look, like, this person like they deserve a raise, like they work really really hard, like I think we could probably find it in the budget to be able to give that to them, like they more than deserve it. We're kind of going back and forth and the manager's like really apprehensive to it. I'm like, dude, like even if I have to forego like my raise, like I don't care, like just pay this lady, like I'll be able to pay my bills, like I'm fine, I didn't have my kids yet or anything. And I had like a really sweet situation with my parents where they were letting me stay at the house and all I had to do is pay for, car insurance and the phone bill. So at the time, like I was in a good situation. So I'm like, yo, like just look out for this person. Like they work really hard. Like they're one of the two people that I went to all the time for stuff. The department again, like they just really deserved it. So, um, again, after going back and forth a little bit, they just hit me with like, oh, like if you want to make it far in this company, you gotta stop. You gotta stop thinking about things like that. Like you gotta start looking out for yourself, and not getting so caught up on people. Like that's not gonna get you far. And I'm just like, holy, like did this dude just say this shit? Like especially when you have that inverted triangle and like
Mm-hmm.
what? Like are you so like that was like one of the first things in my mind where I'm just like, yo, like this shit is fucked. Like hell no, that's not right.
Yeah.
I shake it off. I'm like, like it's a one off. Like maybe it's just that person. Everybody's got their own outlook on things. And I knew that person was like super pro Home Depot. That was where they were making their career. So they were all the way bought in. I didn't see it that way. You know what, man, whatever. And I kind of just brushed it off, kept going. Right. So then receiving was where I kind of like really got to hit like the culmination of just like how fed up I was like in that store, looking at the system, looking at how the store was just treated. Because again, it's just like, right, like you would just have like these messes, like, dude, there would be days where we would walk in and you just have like this like super thin path to like walk through and to like be able to get through the department and trying to work. And like every 5 seconds you gotta stop to move some trash out the way. It's just, man, it's like super cluttered, super messy. used to be really frustrating because whenever we would have our like corporate walks, what would always happen is like people would just go and like they would clean up their department. They would get all of the shit that they didn't want in their department, and they would just go and drop it off like in my department and then close the door. So it's like, corporate people are walking around checking the store, and like we're just tucked away in the back corner of the store with like all the trash. Like, yeah, you guys basically
Hmm.
just get to deal. Like I would always say, like our receiving end is like the toilet of the store. Like
Yeah,
all
that's
the
what
shit
it
that
sounds
people
like.
don't, yeah, all the shit that people don't want just gets shuffled back there. And so, sometimes it would be like, right, like a lot of times they would always try and be like, oh, well, it's these associates. We have to hold the associates accountable. Like, but it's like when you take a step back and look at it, it's like, well, they're being told to go do that stuff, right? They're being told to go to go drop this trash off here, to just leave it, right, and to go worry about other things. And so then, of course, like people will be like, oh, well, then it's the managers, it's their fault. And it's like, okay, well, yes, they told the person to go and to take the trash back there, and yes, that is a problem. But again, why is that happening? Because they have so little resources in the store. They're being told to play chess, but they've only got like five pawns, the king, the queen, and like, maybe a bishop, and that's it. And they're being told like go win the chess match, and it's
Yeah,
like,
and a Cheeto that like they're saying is like this is the rook.
yeah, exactly. And it's like, okay, well, like, some of these people, like, they do make decisions that piss me off, but like at the same time, like, are they really being set up for success though? Like, are they really
Hmm.
being put in a successful situation? And right. And so you would just kind of like, especially again, being back there, right. And I bought into it, just that manufactured, like, just butting of heads all the time, and that like outrage, management, it's the associates, it's the daytime, it's the nighttime, like everybody's just blaming each other in the store. And so like after kind of working around everywhere, right, working back there, working in the receiving end, I take a step back and I'm like, oh shit, this is not anybody in the store's fault. This is the way that this place is fucking run. That's the
Hmm.
problem. That's the actual issue. The way that this place operates and the way that this store is treated and the way that this company just views the people within the store is indisposable. And I know some people would take apprehension to that. I know I'll probably get some funny looks when I go back to work after people see this. But it's like, look, you can't send people to work during a deadly pandemic, whether people agree with it or not, right? Because I know people feel like differently. But like at the time, nobody knows what's going on. Like Home Depot's even touting that this is a deadly pandemic. So it's like by your standards, right? This is deadly. This is a problem. That you're still sending people to work. And then like you've got people that are struggling to pay their bills. You got people that are stressed out, like freaking out, right? Paying with their emotional health, paying with their mental health, paying with their physical health. You have all of these things going on, and it's like, yo, like you guys are really like not making any type of effort in order to fix it. And again, like I don't just say that willy nilly, right? So I could see working the management side, seeing like all of those issues. Um, and again, like just like participating in that to the point where I never forget. Like it was the day that I was just like, I don't think I can do this. So I'm sitting down with one of my managers and we're going through the profit and loss report, right? And they're explaining everything to me, breaking down comp percentages, how you want to try and save money, what's the best ways for the businesses to make money. Like, right, like going through all of that stuff. And generally, I'm a little bit more of a nerd, right? I'm always like super engaged and super enthused. And I could just like feel my eyes glazing over. And I'm just like, holy shit, how little do I care about making this company more money? And then, like, I realized, like, if I stay, if I go that route, like that's my life. And like that's what my life is centered around. Like that is the point. That is the purpose. And I was like, oh, it was like almost like an existential crisis when I went on vacation, like a little bit after that. Cause I'm like, they're about to change their leadership program, right? So some supervisors are getting promoted, some people are going to be stepping down, whatever. So, there's a couple of people talking to me like, oh, like this is your chance, right? There was this position called a night replenishment manager that they had just created, that they were going to put me in. And then essentially from there, I was going to, springboard to what's called an overnight, assistant manager position at another store. So basically, it was going to be like a double jump within, like, I think it was like 6 months or something. They were probably looking at where I was going to go do that for a little bit and then bump on to the next one. Like, man, I'm telling you, like, I just remember sitting on the beach and being like, is this what I want? Like for my life, right? And I'm like reflecting on the pandemic. I'm reflecting on all the issues I've seen. right? And it's again, is I kind of joke around, but it really did feel like a little bit like existential because it's like holy crap, like this is like all of these things that I'm criticizing in a way like I will somehow end up supporting if I go and I continue to grow within this company, right? And then it's like you look at, well, why is it that I'm growing? It's because of my people skills. It's because of my ability to get people to do things. So then I basically become a frontline version of exploiting people. And it's like, ah, man, I can't do this. So I remember that shit was crazy that day. So I end up making up my mind. I tell the manager, and I'm like, yo, like I don't want a promotion. Like I don't even want to stay a supervisor. I want to step down. Like I want to be an associate. Like I was actually, I'd applied to the fire department. I was like, I kind of want to go. Like I don't want to be in this company anymore. Um, and like I never want to say that like in a disparaging way to people. To like the people who still work there, to the people who go and who take those positions, right? Because everybody has the reasons for walking the path that they do. Um, but like for me personally, like I couldn't do it. And then like the more that I like learned about Home Depot, the more that I learned about how much money they make, you know, and where they spend their money and some of the things that they do, I was just like, man, like, yeah, like, you know, you hear about Amazon all the time, you hear about Starbucks all the time, Walmart, and I was just like, Home Depot does the same shit. They just are really good at like covering it up and getting people to not talk about it. You know, the stuff with stock buybacks, underpaying people, you know, record profits, like all of that stuff. And I just remember like going through and like I still had access to a lot of things. So I was able to see a lot of information going through, looking at the profit and loss reports, you know, looking at the earnings report for the company, looking at different videos talking about like their business strategy. And I'm just like, man, like these people have a plan. Like they basically want to be the Carnegie and the Rockefeller of the home improvement sector, right? They want to corner that market. You know, they want to try and control their supply chain, right? Hit that horizontal and that vertical integration. That way, then they become such a behemoth. And what I like personally saw looking at that is I was like, oh, like if you do that, it doesn't matter how you treat your labor. Like, you know, you've got a government that doesn't enforce its antitrust policies or does like a weak ass job of doing it. Um, you know, you have such a head start on all of your other competitors. Now you're figuring out how to control your supply chain. Like from a business perspective, it's absolutely genius, right? If your goal is to keep on pushing profits, right, and that's what you're trying to do. Like I mean, that's a plan if there is one. But again, is it's like you feel like in all of that you lose your humanity a bit, right? Like where's the humanity in that? What about the people that get you to that point? Then you look at stuff like shareholders. Man, it was just it's crazy the amount of money that that store makes, the amount of money that that company makes, where they put the money. I was just like, man, you hear one thing, right? We care about our associates, we care about our essential workers. Right now, as a supervisor, like I personally felt that, right? I was like, oh, like yes, like I care about the people on my team, I care about the people in the building, right? My success goes as my team goes. That's where my success is going to be driven. So as long as I make sure they're good, they have what they need, they're happy, they're content, then they're going to make sure I'm good. But then I just realized like it felt like it didn't really matter where you were like on that spectrum, like especially like closer to like the entry level positions and like the lower level like management positions. Oh, you were never going to be given what you needed. And that's because ultimately, right, is it's a system in place. And it's like, I'm sure you probably heard it growing up. So many people have, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, the people at the top, they're the ones, you know, in charge of this stuff. And for them, it's not broken. So why are they going to fix it? They're
Well,
making record profits. Like,
no, I think that's like so perfectly put because like I think that was like yeah, like one of the things that really started to strike me like just talking to different workers over the course of the pandemic is I was like, all right, a lot of this shit seems very, very broken.
mhm.
And a lot of, you know, workers in different stores, different industries, totally different types of jobs are trying to like do something to fix it. And then it yeah, kind of dawned on me what the realization that you just articulated was like, oh, but like for the people who own these businesses, it's not broken. Like this is how they want it to be. And like the example that I give people is, you know, after it was like a year into the pandemic, we started hearing just on every fucking, mainstream media outlet that no one wants to work anymore. Right.
Yeah, you did. Yo, that was. Oh my goodness, I love that video you did. Like it was like back in. Can't remember exactly when, but yes, I know exactly what you're talking about. I remember.
This is the breaking points one.
Yeah, I think there was breaking points, and I think I might have seen. Yeah, matter of fact, I think that's what it was. Yeah, and it's just again like a lot of what you had to say in that. Like I felt like as a worker on the front lines, I'm like, thank God, like somebody gets this shit because it's like you're like everybody's like, oh, nobody wants to work anymore, and it's like, yo, like you got to add like an asterisk there because it's like nobody wants to work insane hours for very little money, doing a bunch of extra work for free just to go make some other rich asshole even fucking richer while they're struggling in their own personal life. Like that's actually it. Like that's the problem, and just because like you may have like a certain tolerance for the bullshit doesn't mean everybody else does. And just
Mm-hmm.
because you're not willing to make, your employer pay you for that doesn't mean that then we should let that be the stand. Yeah, that like it's hard, right? Because there's people that I really like fuck with that like say that, and I'm just like, man, like, ugh, that hurts.
Well, yeah, I feel the same way, whether they're in my family or friends. And like, I had to kind of take a step back and I was like, okay, are you just saying this because you're, as we say, drinking the Kool-Aid? Like, are you just buying what the media is telling you? Or is there something else going on here? And I think like to be generous with the folks that I know who believed that and maybe even still do, it's because like they're just looking at what's around them and kind of matching it to what they're hearing on the media, right? So like when I went back home to Southern California for like the first time in 3 years, this came up with some members of my family because they were like, yeah, I drive around and I see help wanted signs everywhere. So it must be true that all of these businesses are trying to hire people, but quote unquote, no one wants to work. And at the, like at the time that I mentioned like a year into the pandemic, like there was a very real political motivation behind this, right? Because, lawmakers and politicians in DC were essentially pissed off that, working people had gotten like a modicum of security with, I think our government could have done a whole fucking lot more. I think that our employers, just got off like bandits by and large. But, talk to anyone, who got those stimulus checks, got the extended unemployment benefits, or the extended child care tax credit, or the eviction moratorium, the pause on student loan payments. Like that shit mattered, right? Because that's the stuff that nickel and dimes us every goddamn month. It feels like every time we get a check, there's just like 10 hands that immediately reach in and take all of it. And like I got $200 at the end of it, and it's just such a deflating feeling. And like for because this is something people told me when I was interviewing them for the book that just came out, which is like 10 interviews with workers during COVID, is they even said then, like, I feel guilty about saying this because this is such a horrible situation. People are dying. Everyone's scared. I'm still scared. But those extended unemployment benefits meant that I could actually, for a second, take a step back and actually, like, not have to force myself into a job that I hate because I need to pay rent. Like, it's sad to think that we were all living so close to the bone that that's all it took for us to have a little bit of breathing space to realize, how much we were getting screwed over. But anyway, the point I'm getting at is like the whole no one wants to work bullshit narrative was like directly targeted at ending those programs, right? And that's what all these fucking state legislators were saying, that it was all just like anecdotes. There's like, oh yeah, like I've heard from a McDonald's franchise owner that they can't get anyone to sign on to, take these jobs. It's because they're all getting fat off, the government money, and they're being lazy. So that was the narrative, right?
No.
And then I just kept talking to people, kept publishing these interviews, And it really stood out to me that so many people were saying, look, that's bullshit. Like, we, the workers, are begging these companies to hire more people, and they can't or they won't. Like, they are deliberately understaffing us. They are not really like trying hard to hire people. They're not making this kind of job attractive to potential employees. So then, like, you get another side of the story, and you realize that whether it's like Chipotle, Home Depot, the fucking freight railroads, anywhere in retail and service work, like, everyone's seeing it. Everyone's seeing like dollar stores where there's only like one or two people working there. And again, they're hearing on the media that it's because no one wants to work. But if you look around and you start to see like, well, so many of these stores are being understaffed while the businesses are raking in record profits, like, something's not adding up here. And like, that's when it really started to dawn on me, and I think a lot of other people, is like, oh, well, this is just bullshit. Like, they basically have just realized that we can claim that the problem is that workers are lazy, because that's always what they do. But really what we're doing is we're piling more work onto fewer workers. We're burning people out. The quality of the service across the board is going down, but we don't fucking care, because that means our operating costs are down, profits are up,
Exactly.
and it's just like, it's nuts. And I think that, like, when you looked at like those numbers and you kind of see, oh, well, Home Depot's actually making a lot, and yet, the receiving department is a mess, like, everyone's stressed out. Like, again, just to go back to the way that you put it, which was so perfect, it's like, it's broken for us, but not for them. Like, this is the way that they want it to be.
Yeah, and I mean, right, like, I think, like, right, like, something I kind of like thought about, right? You had this one like great video you also did talking about like the importance of time, right? The battle of time, and how important that is for people, right? And when you take, some of the things that you just enumerated, like talking about the Great Resignation, and how people felt coming out of that, in terms of like, oh, like, again, like, I don't want to go to work. Like, the job is not adapting, right? Like, if I could put it into like, so like, I'm super into fitness, right? I go to the gym every morning. If I could turn it to an analogy like that, it's like if I go in and I do the same exact routine every day for like 20, and it's a half-assed routine, right? It's barely putting in any effort. The routine sucks. My diet sucks. Like, I'm not eating properly, right? But I'm still going to the gym every day, but I'm not making all the necessary changes. And then, a year from now, I look exactly the same, and I'm like, well, what the hell? Working out just, it doesn't work. Going to the gym doesn't work. And it's like, no, tonto, like, you got to do some other stuff with that. Like, it's
Mm-hmm.
not just doing that. And that's how I feel that like, you know, like, companies act, whether it's Home Depot or whether it's Amazon, it's like, they are so caught up in the smell of their own shit, and they think that everything that they create is just gold, and it's just such a great idea. And it's like, it's not. It's
Mm-hmm.
not. And guess what? It's not disrespectful for people to call that out. It's not disrespect. Like, if you find that disrespectful, you were too arrogant, right? Because if there's one thing that I learned that was super humbling, like working in the work environment that I did, was to realize that, intelligence isn't what you know, it's how quickly you can process the things you take in. Right. And the only difference between, like, growing up, right, like in more like in the inner city, right, in Philadelphia, I grew up in a neighborhood called Frankfurt. Like, all my family's from North Philly. If there's one thing being in environments like that and being in environments like Home Depot that I realized is like, right, like, the only difference between, drug dealers down the way and, people down the street in Wall Street, right? The only difference between them is the arena and the opportunity that's afforded to them, right? A lot of the strategies, a lot of that stuff is actually super similar, right? But it's just the perception that one has in society over the other. And that's, again, where I think a lot of these problems are born out, is because, like, these people who control everything, they think like, oh, well, this is just how it has to be. Like, I sacrifice, so now you have to sacrifice. And that was something that I learned, like, on my very short climb, like, in that up the ladder, like, in that company, was it was like, I remember sitting down and having a conversation with the store manager at the time, and being like, look, dude, like, my brain does not function well, like, in this type of environment. Like, I need to do more. Like, I'm not living up to my potential in the position that I'm in. And he just kept telling me, oh, well, You have to be a store manager. You have to be a store manager. You have to be a store manager. Then from store manager, you can go anywhere you want. And I'm just like, but look, why do I like if I studied economics and I show an ability to understand numbers, to read through, like if I show propensity for that, like why then would you not just say, hey, this guy's being underutilized and this, let's go put him over here, right? If it's about putting people in the best position to succeed, right? And again, like I'm talking about me because I live that, but there's so many other people where that would be the case in that building where it's like these people's skill set are better catered to do other things, but you don't put them there. Like why? And like the only conclusion that I could hit after that was it's just like this is an indoctrination process. Like that's what it is it's you have to make it to store manager because once you get to that point, then we're like, okay, they are sufficiently on our team. They're sufficiently, bought in. Now we can put them anywhere, and they're going to bleed orange, right? It's like, look, man, like not everybody wants to tether their life to what it is that they do. Like the things that always defined me, especially before I became a supervisor, like music, fitness, playing video games. Like that was the shit that I cared more about. Like I just want to work to pay my bills, and save a little bit of money. Yeah, so it's like, most people they just want to go to their job, do what they got to do and go back home, right? Go back to their families. And for the people who want to tether like their ambition and like their life's meaning to what it is that they do for work, like, hey, like by all means, like, right, it's your life to live. It's whatever you want to do with it. But the problem is then you create a system in which like if people want to have a decent life, then that's what they have to do, right? And it's like that's like my issue with like, oh, nobody wants to work anymore and people are just lazy. And it's like, no, like when you spend too much time at work, when you spend too much time making somebody else money, putting yourself in emotionally taxing situations, physically taxing situations, spiritually taxing situations, like that shit just takes its toll on you, right? It starts to suck the life out of you. Like one thing I always tell people, I remember, right? So I've been playing guitar since I was 13. I became a I always used to hear music in my head like all the time. I became a supervisor and like that it stopped. And then, I went through for the next year, barely ever heard music in my head, barely even listened to music, right? Because I was just so absorbed with work. Step back down. Guess what? Like that, the music comes back, right? Why? Because you're so focused on like what you're doing and you're like and it's like for what? Like why? Like at the end, like I go right and I learn my store and I learn how to work every department except for two. And I never say no. And I go and I deal with manager calls and I go and I learn how to drive the machines and I become a trainer and I translate for people and I take the time to learn about plumbing to tell people how to fix various plumbing projects, and I go and I get in a box truck that's 120 degrees and for an hour and a half straight, I'm just in truck throwing boxes and I'm busting my and why are you doing that for a couple but for like for instance at the time I was in the box trucks, right, those suckers would get up to like 115 120 degrees and we would be in there for a full like hour and a half 2 hours straight just throwing boxes, right? It's like a freaking sauna. And at the end I was getting paid like $11 an hour, $12 an hour. I'm saying sweating my ass off, like killing myself. I got scars on my body. I got this one cut on my leg that literally cut me all the way to my shin bone from these copper pipes. And you sit there and you ask yourself, like, why? Like, why am I doing this? And it's like literally, it's so that somebody else, who just happen to have a bunch of money for whatever reason, maybe they worked really hard for it. The more likely thing is they were probably born into it. Maybe they exploited somebody to get it. They parked their money somewhere and now they get to get the lion's share just because they parked their money there. Like, you got to go fucking toil, at the bottom, earning, right, generating, producing that surplus, right? Like I think about a lot, like listening to Professor Richard Wolff, and like his podcast, like Economic Update, and like how he talks about, like, right, like the system of capitalism and how you have workers who create the surplus and then you have a bunch of people at the top who control the surplus, right? And you just see like that's the fucking problem right there, right? So then you go and you're right, and he would compare like capitalism to like feudalism and slavery, right? And just basically saying like each thing is just an evolution of the previous system. And it's like, yeah, man.
Yeah,
Yeah, and then
that checks out.
It's like exactly like right because like I remember my girlfriend told me that this shit was hilarious, right? So I forgot who the dude was. This is a young kid. And you made this TikTok, right? So it was a response because I don't know if it was like Tony Lair, somebody like that.
Mm.
Did one of those, oh, it's Halloween, this is what the Halloween with socialism looks like, right? And they go and they do their whole freaking straw man bullshit. And they have the kid trick or treat, and then they say, okay, well, here's some for, Sally, and here's some for Billy, even though they
Oh.
did none of the work, right? And they do, right?
Fucking
So this shit,
conservatives love that shit. I grew up on dumbass
yeah.
analogies like that, and it just
No,
pains me every time I hear one now.
oh my goodness, right? But so my girlfriend shows me this. I think it was either TikTok or an Instagram. This kid had like such a brilliant comeback to it. So he goes, "Oh yeah, because capitalism is better." And then he grabs a pillowcase, and it tells the kid, "All right, go trick or treating." Right, and the kid fills up the fucking case, and the guy goes, takes the fucking bag, takes 90% of the candy, gives the kid 10% of the candy, and says, "Well, because I own the bag, I get to take 90% of this now." And someone's just like, dude, like that's exactly the problem. And even like and what it is that we're fighting for and like trying to do this, like I'm not trying to sit here and say that your average Home Depot associate needs to be a fucking millionaire. Right. What I'm saying instead is, and to a point that you kind of enumerated, right? And something that I could say that I personally lived like, right. Part of the reason why I ended up in Home Depot was because like I was always just like raised like, you have to make sure you maintain a job. You have to make sure you hold a job no matter what. And I felt like I had a lot of skills that had I had more of the courage to go and to try and, market and to try and, like make a living in different ways. Like had I had that confidence, maybe things could have gone differently, right? But that's just kind of the problem in our economic system where it's instead like you're like told like, no, you have to hold a job, you have to get a
Hmm.
steady paycheck because if not, you're gonna be homeless. And if you want to do something better, then you got to go to college. But then you go to college and then you're saddled with all this debt, and then you still get the same job anyway. Oh shit! Like what the hell, right? And it's again, is it's you sit back and you look at this, and it's like no, like they benefit from a system like that, right? Like you talked about in your piece on time. If I have more time now to go and to figure out how to market, my music making ability or what I know in fitness, right? If I have more time to go do that, now I'm making more money for myself, right?
Hmm.
Now that's less money that goes to them. That's also less time that's spent with them. Now maybe their profits start to look a little bit different. And then especially too, if you're paying people properly, then you're giving them the time to go and to invest in themselves a little bit more. It's like, no, they don't want none of that shit. They want your ass parked in a store, for 40 hours out of the week. If it was up to them, they'd probably rescind some of the labor laws that were, enacted back in the 30s and
Oh
then say,
yeah.
nah, make those motherfuckers work 70-hour fucking work weeks. And if they miss an hour, if they were miss a minute of work, get rid of them and, put somebody else. But it's like, yeah, like that's kind of the core of it is it's like, oh, like I feel like it's a disservice to society to like pigeonhole people into stuff like that. Because
Yeah.
it's like, imagine there's somebody out there right now working a job that they don't want to work, that probably has this skill that would be like so beneficial to humanity. But because they got to go fucking clock in for 40 hours a week at, one job and part time at another job in order to pay their bills, we'll never get to experience that. Not
Yeah.
because the person wasn't qualified. Not, sometimes it's not even because they didn't try. It's just because we have a bullshit system that's just built off of exploitation. Like, oh, man,
And I mean,
it's wild.
it's so goddamn wasteful of human potential, right? I think
Yep.
that the way that you put that is just so powerful and perfect and depressing, right? I mean, like there's this great quote by Stephen Jay Gould that is always kind of stuck in my head, but just makes exactly the point that you're talking about, where he said, quote, "I am somehow less interested in the weight and convolutions of Einstein's brain than in the near certainty that people of equal talent have lived and died in cotton fields and sweatshops." End quote. Like, and just that's like the kind of conditioning that we get in this country and all, and like in so many places over the world. Like there's so much human potential there that is just wasted because these systems only see us as warm bodies to perform certain, tasks. not as, flesh and blood human beings with just an infinite amount of creativity and passion and the ability for leadership, the ability to kind of create something better out of this planet and out of this society than what we have now. But like you said, we've created this perfect mousetrap where, the vast majority of us just have to toil and to get by, to keep a roof over our heads, to provide some level of security for our family. And so we have to surrender our life for that, right? I know we always love to say, work to live, don't live to work. Well, motherfucker, most of us don't have the choice to do that, right? And that's by design. And I think I wanted to kind of hook that back into something else you were saying, right? Because I think this is one of the things that I didn't realize until much later in life either, much like yourself, right? I realized just how much social engineering happens in the workplace, right? How essential the workplace is for making us the kind of subjects that capitalism needs us to be, or that a corrupt political system needs us to be, right? You already pointed out some of them. It's this system, in order to keep the system that we have in this country going, where, I don't even know where to start, right? Where, the rich have taken over everything. They've bought off all the politicians. They've stocked all the courts. They've adjusted all the laws to favor them and their commercial interests over the rights and needs of working people. The people in DC just flat out don't listen to the vast majority of their constituents, especially those in the poor and working classes. There's just so much kind of broken that doesn't need to be. But this is the way you maintain that system, is by convincing the vast majority of people that nothing can be done about it, especially nothing can be done by us, right? To change it. The best we can hope for, is some sort of change handed down from on high from this or that elected official, or this or that unaccountable genius tech billionaire like Elon fucking Musk or whatever the hell, right? That's when you live in a society where that is the best that you can hope for, that's not a society worth maintaining, in my opinion, because we can dream so much better than this, right? We have so much more potential than this. And it just really, really hit me in the chest when you said that, you would hear songs in your head, and then when you became a supervisor, the music stopped. It speaks, very much to my own experience as someone who wanted to be a writer my whole life, and always had a love of reading and writing, but never saw it as anything more than a hobby, but who still felt that creative desire, it was something that I needed to do to feel like myself, right? Was just sit down and write. And that was so important to me. And I remember times when I was just, working nonstop, and that part of me just sort of withered away, or it atrophied like a muscle when you got a cast on or something like that. And I think that to the point about, the workplace being this kind of factory where subjects are made, right? This is the bigger picture thing that I hope everyone listening kind of thinks about. It's because what does that engineering do, right? What exactly are we being taught or trained to be in these kind of laboratories, right? I remember saying this maybe in a past episode, but I was I feel like the quote unquote starter jobs, right? The jobs you get out of high school, the jobs that you get while you're in high school, right? Low paying, exploitative jobs that so many of us have to, do, as we kind of find our way into adulthood. Yes, you're doing kind of service work, retail work, you're working in shipping, you're cleaning, whatever you're doing, right? You're doing that to kind of make a paycheck, get by, so on and so forth. But at the same time, you are being schooled in how to be powerless, right? You were being trained to accept like being controlled by unelected managers and business owners who tell you what to do, who have so much control over your life, and you are kind of essentially taught to accept the fact that you have really nothing that you can do about that. Then you accept that hierarchical arrangement, right? You just kind of accept, you're like, well, this is the way it is. This is the way it's always going to be. And like that shit filters out into other realms of our lives, right? Because then because we spend most of our goddamn lives in the workplace anyway. And so if that's the kind of arrangement that we are, experiencing on a day-to-day basis, then why would you like clock out at work and think that like, I don't know, your relationship to the government's going to be any different, right? Your relationship to any, like business entity is going to be any different. You just kind of carry over that sense that, all right, the people at the top are there because they deserve to be. I'm down here because I deserve to be. And there's nothing I can really do to change this. And also like, I don't really have the time or strength, to do anything about it anyway, because I'm working my ass off and I'm exhausted. Like that is the kind of training that we all get in this kind of system, which is why. Oh, well, actually, like, and just one more point on that, because I think that you're absolutely right that you get a kind of more targeted form of that kind of training when they start grooming you to be a manager. Right. Because that also spoke to me, because I remember when I was working at this one warehouse back in California, and I was a temp, but I was a hard worker like you, like was very much raised on the belief that like if you're going to do a job, you got to do it well. That's what my dad told me. And I would always get pissed because I remember one time, like when I worked at this frozen yogurt place in Orange County, every night someone had to mop, right? And I realized at the end of one week, I was like, wait, why am I the only one fucking mopping at the end of the day? Yeah. And the manager was like, well, you're the only one who tries at it. And I was like, so I'm being rewarded with the shit job that I don't want to do because I'm the only one who's doing it well. And that was like my dad. I had my dad in my head. I was like, God damn you, Dad. Like, why didn't you tell me to like do a shitty job? But then like when I was at this, so when I was at this warehouse, I was kind of carrying that over. Like I hated being there. I was depressed, but I was like, whatever, I'm here. This is how I'm getting my money, and I'm just going to do the job as best I can. And I remember as they started kind of grooming me to be a manager, right? And they started training me and to think the way that you described, right? And they started, like I looking back on it now, I could see how they preyed upon, those sort of, I don't know, like good intentions and good qualities that hardworking people have, but they turn it into something that they can use and as a weapon against like other workers, right? So like they try to convince you, that you're special, you're more special than the other people on the shop floor, right? That you can see the bigger picture, right? And I remember one time this woman who like had been there at the warehouse for a long time, but she was a little bit older. She didn't really get a lot of respect, and she got a lot of shit from the younger managers. And so she was leading a team of us to kind of, get a big shipment done on time. And we were way behind. And the other managers and the VP were giving this woman a whole lot of shit. And, I remember, God, it's like, I feel gross about it now, but like there was a point where I was standing around them because again, they were grooming me to be a manager. So sometimes I was like in those conversational circles. And they were like, we need, this many pallets wrapped, stacked, tagged, and loaded onto this many trucks by, this date. And like, we're this far behind. And so I was like, the one woman was like, well, this is the best that we can do. The VP was like, that's not good enough. And I was like, well, I think we could like do a little bit better. And so he looks at me, points to me, he's like, okay, you're the lead on this now. And at the moment I thought, oh, shit, here's my chance. But what I realize is what you just said is like, well, like we're all being set up to fail here. There is no way any of us can make that quota. This woman's the only one who's just being honest about it because we have so many temps who are untrained. A lot of mistakes are going to happen. And then they just blame those mistakes on the workers and fire them and bring in new people, yada, yada, yada.
Mm-hmm.
But it just like, I didn't see that at the time that I was walking into a trap, you know, because that's the way that they want it to be. Like everyone is being set up to fail because this is my long way of getting back to your point. That is like, that was when I realized what you realized. I was like, oh, like even managers, the middle managers on the floor, like it's not their problem. The problem is the front office committing to a business model that is unsustainable or that like, that we can't humanly possibly do. And we inevitably fail at it, they're just going to fire us and replace us.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, like, right, like it's funny because as you kind of speak on your experience at the warehouse, right? Like I remember, like, so like one thing, so from what we were told, right? So the way that we unload like our stock for the store was piloted actually at my store. So sorry everybody who works at Home Depot, who works on the breakdown crew and absolutely hates that system. It's probably our fault because in our store we didn't tell the truth. We didn't tell the truth about the faults of the system, right? And I think again, right, like people's first inclination is to get mad at like store leadership and be like, oh well, they should have just told the truth. They should have. And it's like, look, man, when you have conversations where you see like, right, like for instance, you said like your vice president and then like a store manager, like watch that store manager, disagree with the vice president, right? And say, that might be a good idea, but you have to tweak it by doing this, this, and this, because these things happen in our store. And the look of scorn that person is going to get, like, who the hell are you to challenge me, right? And that's the problem, right? Is that nobody wants to tell the truth. Everybody just wants to kiss each other's ass so that they can get what that person has, right? Because that's always the goal, is I want to get to where that next guy is or that next gal is. And, as long as I get there, that's going to be okay, right? That's one of the things that I absolutely freaking hate with my store when they tell people if you want to make more money, then you got to move up. Why? Because now you're going to incentivize people who don't belong in those positions to now be in those positions, not because they want to be there, but because it's the only way for them to make more money. Because there's so many people at my store where I'm like, if I told you that you could make more money driving forklifts, translating, and working multiple departments, would you still want to be a supervisor? And the vast majority of people say no. I would just go do those other things and make more money. Like, it's like you go into your point, like you create this culture that then becomes cancerous to itself. But where the major problem lies, though, is again, right? It's like when you hear people talk about like pharma, right? They socialize the cost, but they privatize the gains, right? We socialize the cost of the success, right? And we all have to pay the price. We all got to put some skin in the game. But when it comes time to break down on the rewards, right? Like here's a great way to kind of put it in perspective of the numbers in my store, right? So, this is going to be a little bit of a winded explanation, but I promise you I'll be able to bring it home, right? So
do it, baby.
we have what's called success sharing in the store, right? So it's where they give bonus checks at the end of the year, and it's based off of your sales plan, right? So the way that it's calculated for stores is you get 0.75% of every dollar earned from 90% of your sales goal to 100% of your sales goal. And then you get 3% of every dollar earned from 100% on, right? So that netted us last year in 2021. It was about $521,000 between the two checks, right? And that was using those calculations. We had sold, I believe it was 99 million for the year. We were 7 million over, I believe, the first half, and I think 8 million over our sales plan the second half. And again, being $15 million over our sales plan, we got $521,000 in bonuses, right? And again, that's just the sales plan. That's not even when you look at the profit, right? So I, being the numbers guy I am, bored one day, said, I'm going to just play around with these numbers, right? So I took the cash dividends that were paid out to shareholders, and I would equate that to the success sharing that's given to associates in the store, right? Because it's a direct cash payout from the company for excess profit earned, right? So you take that 7 billion and you divide it by the 16.4 billion that was earned in profits in 2021. And that comes out to roughly 42% of profits that were made were paid out to shareholders in the form of cash dividends, right? If you take that 42% and you apply it to my store last year made $30,170,052. If you want, look at that text message I sent you. You'll see it right there. But, you know, if you take that and you multiply it by the 42%, the associates in the store in 2021 got $521,000 and the shareholders got fucking $12.8 million. Like, bro, what? But when my one friend goes up, right, they're working the service desk, they're working the registers, they're working tool rental. Oh, and their actual job title is garden associate. So they're supposed to be working in the garden section, right? They're working, they're doing all of that stuff, right? They're getting pulled all over the store. They're getting in trouble because things aren't getting done in their department. Why aren't you getting this done? When you're sending me to tool rental, you're sending me here. You say, well, I don't care. You still got to find a way to get it done. So they're very upset, sit down and they say, hey, I'm doing all of these things. I have already done this, right? I have already committed the work. What's up with a raise? What's up with something like that? And, essentially what she's told is if you take the responsibility of one of the managers, maybe you'll get a raise. Like, what?
Wow. Jesus.
What? Like, and that's the whole thing, right? Is it's because the gig is supposed to be, if you go, you take on more work, you produce more value, you make more money. And like, what's insane, like what's wild is like, I've had conversations with the union busters that come through the store. Other people have had conversations with the union busters in the store talking about this stuff. And they're just basically like, yeah, like we had to do that. Like, why shouldn't you? And it's like, what? Like, are you serious? Like, oh, like it was crazy. The one guy's over here talking about if you want to get paid to translate and to speak Spanish, go to school for it. My boy, what? Like 35% of the people, 35% of the people that roll through that store only speak Spanish. You don't make those dollars if your Spanish speaking associates aren't there to help you.
Mm-hmm.
And he's, oh, well, I don't get paid to speak Spanish. My boy, you make like a 6-figure salary. What are you talking about? Like,
Jeez, man.
seriously? And then like there's another person and they're talking about, somebody who's in school and they're learning Spanish and they're really excited and oh well, I can't wait to get into the workforce because I'm gonna get paid for that. And it's like to fuck the rest of us then that can speak Spanish, huh?
Mm-hmm.
I guess we can just selectively apply when it is that, and it's like, it's crazy, right? And it's in a way, like it almost makes me sympathetic to those people because it's like, come on, you can't have those types of inconsistencies presented in your arguments and think like what's going on is acceptable. That's why, again, like I try very, very hard and I don't know, maybe I'm just too diplomatic in this approach, but it's like, that's the system, man. It's the system. It's the core rot. It's not even just Home Depot. It's just companies in general that think this shit is acceptable, and it's not, right? And the thing is, this you live off in these ivory towers. You never have to deal with the consequences of it. The people who run big box stores, they never have to deal with the consequences of those big box stores. They don't got to go drive up, Venango Street down North Philly where there used to be a bunch of factories, right? And they got run out of business. Why? Because of big box stores like that. So now they're just huge eyesores in these densely packed inner cities. They don't have to deal with that. They don't have to deal with the people who are sitting there stressed out, trying to figure out how they're going to pay for their bills, how they're going to pay for their kids. They don't got to deal with none of that. That person who now has a 2-hour commute to work every day because they just had a problem with their car and now shit don't work, but they still got to get to work. So now they got to take the bus. Nah, instead, those people roll through an $80,000 Mercedes Benz is trying to tell you why you shouldn't unionize. It's like you can't make this shit up. And then they have the audacity to pull people in the back office of mine and say that people like myself are trying to steal money from them, that we're trying to take stuff from them. And it's like, really? Like, you know what? In the end, Godspeed to you because you still have to look in the mirror every day. You still have to live with the person you are in the system that you prop up. right? And that's the major thing that pushed me to this point was when I said, "What if I end up in that position? Could I live with myself?" Like, no,
Yeah.
nah, dude, that's just not cool. That's just not fucking cool. People deserve better than that. Like, I know so many people who have been through so much shit in that building, who are in the circumstance that they're in for whatever it might be, but they deserve better than what they get. And for these people to just try and roll up here after the fact, be like, "Oh yeah, we care about." Come on, man, miss me with that shit. Where I come from, there's a difference between talking about shit and being about shit. If you just talk about it, you don't really care. If you really care, you'll show somebody.
Hell yeah, man. No, I think that's, again, just like perfectly put. And like, I gotta write that down because I think the way you put that was incredible. You say you have to live with the person you become working in the system that you prop up. Like, I think
Mm-hmm.
that that's spot on. And like, I've seen it in so many different areas, like the way that like that, again, that trap works. Like, because what's crazy to me is, like, I remember even seeing this in like higher education, right? So like higher education is in also in a, like, really bad way, and we don't have time to go into all the reasons why that is, but kind of the same shit in a lot of regards, right? For the past 50 years, you know, the ratio in, like, the 1970s and 1980 used to be that like 70% of the teaching done in colleges was done by people who were on the tenure track, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that was like what everyone wanted to be, the professor with the elbow patches who's got good salary and good job protections and all that stuff. Over the course of the past 50 years, like, that's changed. Now it's over 70% like adjuncts who are making, like, you know, poverty level wages. They have no health benefits. They don't even know if they're going to
Mm-hmm.
have a job at the end of the semester. Graduate students, lecturers who like, maybe are like a small step above an adjunct. But like, it's just, like with so many other jobs, just like piling more work onto fewer workers, paying them less at the same time that the bosses in the administration are, like, their salaries are going up, their numbers are going up, so on and so forth. And when I walked into graduate school, like coming from working as a waiter, and I was like, I don't know anything about that system. I just know that my family didn't know anything about the system, but we were just like, yeah, that seems like a nice, comfortable job to have. You should go for it.
Mm-hmm.
And what they all tell you, just like, the managers at the warehouse would tell me, just like these folks at Home Depot are telling you, is just like, oh, well, the best way to kind of change the system is to kind of move your way up in it and put yourself in a position when, you'll be able to actually do something. And what I
Yeah.
realized is, I was like, but that the joke is that if you ever get there, and chances are you will not, but if you ever get there, by the time you get there, you will no longer be the kind of person who wants to change it, right? Because the system will have made you into the person that will prop up that system and like fight to maintain your privileged place within it, like you're saying. So you have to live with the person you become in this, like, working in the system that you prop up.
Mm-hmm.
And like, I think that that's why it's, so, because that applies to all of us, right? Like, this even goes to what we were saying before about the mentality that we're kind of forced to have as workers in that same system, like being kind of socially engineered and existentially engineered, through these jobs to believe that we are as worthless as the system tells us we are. We are as expendable as our boss tells us we are, right?
Mm-hmm.
Our creativity and passion and dreams are as meaningless as this system forces us to believe, because those don't pay the bills. Like, it's just such a sad state of affairs. And I think so many of us are kind of forced into the position of believing that there's just nothing that can be done about it. Um, and that is why it is, like, so huge and such a such a really heroic thing. Like, I'm not blowing smoke up your ass or any of the asses of any person I talk to on this show. Like, I genuinely mean it when I say, like, it is a really big step to say no to that, right? To actually kind of break that mold and say, like, well, maybe I can challenge this system. Like, that I don't have to accept the world that as it is presented to me, as I don't have to
Sorry
accept
about
what's
that.
given to me. Like, maybe in fact, like, we can do something together to change our circumstances. And like, that's what gives me hope, right? It's people like you. It's people like Brandy McNeese and her coworkers at Chipotle in Maine, right? Saying, like, we're not taking this anymore. We're going to try to unionize. And Chipotle, like, closing their store. And people like Brandy still saying, like, we're still going to keep fighting. These Starbucks workers, you know, like, Starbucks is violating their rights left and right, breaking the law in total open, like, public display. They're not hiding it. And the workers keep coming. They keep saying, like, we're not giving up on this fight. Folks at Amazon, like, you know, Jesus, in your hometown, like the museum workers at the Philadelphia Museum of Art.
Museum,
Yeah, they were on strike for like 20 days. And management kept saying, we're not going to bargain you. We're not going to bargain with you. And then they wouldn't give up. And then they got a contract. Like just fighting that fight that comes from that place somewhere in our chest that says, like, I don't have to accept this. We deserve better than this. Like, again, we are not as worthless as this and powerless as this system trains us to believe. And then, like, you know, when other people see like fellow workers taking that step, it kind of creates this ripple effect that we mentioned earlier before. And so that's kind of where I wanted us to end up, because I could talk to you about this for days, but I know you got a little one running around.
Yeah, he's banging on the door right now.
So I promise I won't keep you for much longer, but I did want to ask, like, if you could sort of like talk us through the organizing effort, what it's been like from your end, like how it's developed over the past month or so, where things are now, and you know, most importantly, what everyone listening to this can do to show solidarity with you, everyone at your store, and with Home Depot workers across the country.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, right, this is still, I'd say, crazy to like just kind of consider like all the chaos, right? Like, talking to you before and saying like how a month ago, you know, I was just some rinky-dink, you know, receiving associate, kind of taking it to this point now, kind of bore out exactly from what you said, right? Like, before I kind of delve into anything, so I want to take the time to shout out a coworker of mine who unfortunately was fired recently. He was a supervisor. This guy named Roberto, right? And I think Roberto kind of, when I like reflect on this more and more, like, I got to start giving him more props and more credit, right? Because Roberto was also kind of a catalyst for me in the sense of like, this dude like stands on his principle regardless of anything. Like, if it's going to benefit him, if it's not going to benefit him, like, if he believes something, like, that dude stands on it, right? And he was just consistently an example of that, and kind of gave me like that last little bit of courage I needed to go and to like file that petition, right? And getting to work with him, he was a partner of mine, like as a supervisor, right? And that was where I got to see a lot of that stuff, is because there would be times where like the manager would say something, right? And me at that point in time, being who I was, kind of just being like, oh, like, no, dude, don't say that. And he would be over here like, oh no, this is the right thing to do. Like, this, we have to do this. Like, he was very, very influential in this. I got to take the time to shout him out and like all this. Because that's kind of like where, again, where that bore out of, you know, we got the signatures. We're at the point of the election now. And I mean, like, the efforts, sorry about that. My son's he's knocking on the door. He's getting a little bit distracted. But hold on, wait, give me 1 second.
Yep.
Hey, Papas, can you give me a couple more minutes and I'll be done? No, I'll be right back. Okay, we'll play later. We'll go shopping. Right after I'm done. Give me a couple more minutes. Okay. Thank you. Sorry about that. I'm trying to bust down the door.
No, that's adorable.
No. Thank you. All right. So yeah. So where we're at with like this drive. So right. I would say honestly speaking, if I were to be 100% transparent, I would say right now it's a toss up. Right. I think that there is ample opportunity to push this all the way through. But I also think that I've seen very, in a very firsthand level, the effects of money, right? And how much, money can buy you in terms of people's opinions, in terms of people's favor, right? And it's because what they've been able to do is kind of have this sustained onslaught. They brought in a bunch of old managers who curry favor with some people here. Um, they've brought in like people from all over the country, store managers, assistant managers, what they call associate relations. I call them the union busters. Um, like we've had what I think like a regional vice president visits the store like maybe once or twice a year. Like this dude has been here like 4 or 5 times in the past like 2 weeks. Like, you know,
this
like
homie's
yeah,
this
like
homie's posted up like greeting people
yeah,
at the front door now. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Seriously, like the fucking district manager, this dude never used to say shit. Like when I was a supervisor, this dude never said jack shit to me, like ever. Like now he's talking to me, he's talking to everybody in the store, jumping on register, right? Talking to people, like, and everybody was just like, I didn't even know who this dude was, and what was even crazier about that is this would show like he would at least show up with some frequency. Like he would show up like at least once a week or once every other week. So like in that instance, he's like, damn, bro, like that bad. You just have like a lot of like, oh, this person is the head of this and this person is the head of that. And it's just like I remember talking to one person, it was just like, man, they didn't give two shits about this place. They didn't give two shits about this city, in terms of coming here and paying it that much attention. And it's like, oh, what now that a union effort, like now all of this attention is being paid. And like they try and say like, oh well, it's because of their voice to the associate server. Even though it's funny because you even hear like a fracture in the responses that they give to people. Because like depending on certain individuals, they'll say, oh well, we're here because of the voice of the associate survey and to try and fix that. And then other people are like, yeah, no, we're here because of the union. And it's like y'all can't get on the same page of the bullshit that you're trying to tell people. And like one thing that this has kind of like helped me to realize and like what I'm trying to help other people realize is honestly the only difference between them and ourselves is our perception of the situation, right? And how we perceive ourselves within this system, right? And how we perceive the power that it's had. But I would say it like this, right? For a long time, they tried to make it seem as if, oh, well, people are empowered. If you don't like it, go get another job, go get a job somewhere else. Whatever, right? That was the attitude for a really long time. That ain't the attitude now. Now it's, oh, we're very sorry, we messed up, this, that, the third. Like, the analogy that I've been using with Home Depot is like a cheating spouse, right? They done cheated on you a whole bunch of times. You're like, yo, that's it. I'm done. I'm out the door. I'm done with this shit. I'm tired of you not treating me right. You're not giving me my respect. That's it. And then they're like, now they're going to buy you the flowers you were looking for and take you on the trip you wanted and buy you the gift. And no, I swear this time it'll be different. It's like, 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 come on. But like, you had all these chances before, right? And they love saying like, oh, it's because of the pandemic. That's not because of the pandemic. It's because of how you guys run yourselves. So they're running it like really, really hard. They've, started cracking like how it is that they separate what people with who, right? The people who it's not even people that are necessarily pro union, like, right? Like if you're willing to challenge them and to voice like substantive critiques, yeah, you're going to be put with other people like that. They're going to make sure that they don't put you around like the more docile people who are like timid and, may not really say much, but they know that like, they're malleable enough that if you say some of these things in front of them, that'll be in the back of their mind. What they've also done with those individuals is like try and put them in smaller groups. Your boy has unfortunately still not been able to be a guest of honor at one of those meetings. But my guess is it's because of like all the numbers that I know. And yeah, there's a bunch of reasons why. But yeah, so I have no reason to expect at this point.
Yeah, man,
That
they're not letting your ass in there.
no. That's just like, man, it's yeah. So there's definitely like that. We had to file like a charge with the NLRB for like surveillance and interrogation because like that would just be like a lot of like following associates around. Anytime you're having a conversation, they're jumping up in the conversation. Oh, hey guys, like, what are you talking about? Like that's just stuff like that. Again, like the propaganda, right? They've got these little PowerPoint presentations that they're giving everybody. They're like, Max, they're educating people on what it means to be in a union. and you
They
can
just want
trust
you
them,
guys
right?
to have all the facts,
They
right?
just want you. That's right. That's what they put on the paper. Get the facts. Just get the facts, right? So when people asked them for the fact sheet that they were reading from, you know what they told them? Not these facts. Can't have those. No, this is
Mm.
confidential. Oh yeah, I wonder why that's confidential. Probably they probably are concerned about that for the same reason that they're concerned with still pulling people. They've been doing it now for what? We filed this the last week of September, and literally since then they've been interrogating people about how I got the information that I got. Oh, where did Vince get the? I even had a reporter hit me up like, "Yo, I heard a manager got fired from your store because they said he was helping you get information." I'm like what? That didn't even happen. Like it was just like, but it's like again, like right, like that's how pressed they are, right? But like to like try, and again, like you're not going to address what it is that I'm saying, right? Because from what I've heard, two people that have called them out on it have been like, well, like what about the critiques that Vince has made? Like, what do you have to say to that? Like, is he wrong? Is he wrong about the numbers we're making? It's like, and they're no, he's not wrong about any of that. But we're going to tell you why unions are bad and they're here to steal your money and they're not going to do anything. And we're Home Depot and we do what we want and we don't listen to nobody. And it's like, well, maybe that right there is your problem that y'all don't listen to nobody. Maybe if you started to listen to people more, you wouldn't have been in this situation. And what's crazy is the metric for success that I hold is not some like arbitrary, like I'm just pulling this out of thin air and being like, you know what? Chris Small's got it all right. Yeah, look, that's the standard, right? Like it's not something like that. It's like, yo, like you guys used to do this. Like 20 years ago, they used to pay a starting wage of, $15, $16 an hour. When people would tell me about individuals who would leave the store, they would leave to become lawyers. They would become professionals in a respective trade, electricians, plumbers, right? General contractors, right? They always like ended up going and doing something more, right? Because it was pretty much like if you worked in retail, like you wanted to work at Home Depot, right? Like imagine there were people that were making, they said that there were supervisors that were making like $26, $27 an hour back in like 1998. Like, bro, what? You were good making that type of money. And it's like now, as a supervisor, the cap that I had was 18.25 an hour. Like, what? And like, you get into the history of the company, like, yeah, like man, that's a whole other long conversation. I'll probably have to do separately. And you can kind of just see from there, like where it is that they kind of got this idea from. But essentially, right, they consolidated their business, right? Like you said, they cut costs, they engaged in that corporate culture, and they went and with this one particular CEO, Bob Nardelli, they were able to pretty much double their revenue, right? The dude was from GE, like that was his thing, was consolidating, right? He's working in tech, so you can revert a lot to automation. So that was kind of like the mentality that he applied there. And so, like from a business perspective, they were super successful, right? They were able to grow their business, but it came at the expense of the associates. And then you look at like why does it that happen? When it happened, right? The guys in from 2000 to 2007, 2008, 2009, you have the housing market collapse, which leads to the recession, right? So now you have no real chance to actually fight against that because you're just going to lose your job.
Hmm.
Right. And that was where you saw like a lot of like starting pay rates drop and everything. And so, sorry, I know I'm digressing. I'm going to just bring it back to this point. But now, the reason why now this is coming to is because I saw this as the best opportunity before we ended up in a situation like that, to where it would be like, okay, let's try and fight to organize this place and change this stuff. Because if not, it's just going to get worse and worse and worse. And I mean, they are definitely fighting like hell to quash this. But I think there's a mutual understanding that regardless of however this one goes, they know that they lost. Because this is now moving across the country. There's other people who are interested in doing this stuff, and organizing their workplaces at Home Depots. Right, we were able to partner and chat a little bit and brainstorm with those guys over at Lowe's with our boy Felix over there. Um, and it's just, yeah. So now we're just trying to hammer it home, right? We're trying to inform people, and yeah, I mean, in terms of like support from regular people, like that's where it's always difficult. Like I would say that I kind of have to chalk up to some of my like ignorance as an organ, right? Because I've never done any of this stuff before. Um, but I would say, just being supportive, right? Like a lot of times, like when people like tweet us back or like say stuff, so like some of the stuff that's like tweeted about what's going on, like I go back, I show my coworkers that like we got a way to like mass text people, so we're trying to get that to them, right? Because that makes people feel really good whenever whenever like they're like, oh, like other people care about our struggle,